say charge on. We commit to do extraordinary things. It's a catalyst for action. To put in the work. To keep trying. It's a challenge. To be smarter and stronger. Charge on. It drives us to be more. To get after it every day. It's time to rise above. To let them know we're coming. Charge on. Charge on.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Research, Recovery, and Reskill webinar. This is our first webinar of the spring. Thanks for joining us. I'm Susan Vernon Devlin, Manager of Communications and Marketing here at Rosen College of Hospitality Management, and I will be your host for today's webinar. Today, our webinar will focus on occupational safety management systems, which are workplace tools. Dr. Mark Friend, a Professor of Doctoral Studies at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and noted workplace safety expert, will be presenting. Before we get started, first, a bit of housekeeping. Attendees, we will use the question and answer feature only for this webinar. We will respond to your questions at the end of the presentation or during the presentation if we have time. If your question is the same or similar to another question that has been asked, we will only respond once. If we do not get to your particular question during the webinar, rest assured we will try and reach out to you afterwards to respond to your question. And now I would like to introduce Dr. Kristen Haran, an assistant professor in the Industrial Organizational Psychology program at the University of Central Florida. Dr. Haran is the Deputy Director or Program Administrator for the Targeted Research Program, or TRT for short. In this role, Dr. Haran organizes and evaluates each semester's TRT program workshop. Dr. Haran will provide a brief overview of the TRT program and introduce today's speaker. Dr. Haran.
Thank you so much, Susan. I'll give our speaker a moment to pull up the slides. And while he's doing so, I just want to say thank you so much to our alumni, students, researchers, and hospitality professionals who've taken the time to join our webinar. Before we get started, I want to encourage you to take our pre-webinar survey if you haven't already done so, if you are a hospitality professional. Next slide, please. We use these surveys to evaluate our outreach services, report to funding agencies, and, if you allow us, for research purposes. As a reminder, this pre-webinar survey is just for hospitality professionals, and that does include anyone who's watching this after the fact on YouTube. After the webinar today, all viewers, including hospitality professionals, students, and researchers, will have a chance to complete a post-webinar survey. Now that we've got that housekeeping item out of the way, I'd like to give you a brief introduction to the Targeted Research Training Program. Next slide, please. The Targeted Research Training Program is a program housed within the University of Central Florida Psychology Department. We focus on research to improve health and safety in hospitality organizations, graduate training, and outreach services for both academic and industry audiences. Next slide, please. This program is part of a larger group called the Sunshine Education and Research Center at the University of South Florida, which is funded by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. Next slide, please. I would like to thank each of our core faculty from the UCF Psychology Department and Rosen College of Hospitality Management, our multi-institution and interdisciplinary research team, and our advisory board partners. Our program of research, training, and outreach, including this webinar, would not be possible without their effort and expertise. The activities of the Targeted Research Training Program extend beyond this webinar. We address a wide range of work-related health and safety concerns. We are always open to academic industry partnerships, and we regularly offer outreach events each semester. We believe that employee health and safety is the foundation for a thriving hospitality organization, and that has never been more true than in these challenging times. At the end of this presentation, there will be a link to the TRT website. I encourage you to visit our website so that you can keep up with TRT projects and events. Next slide, please. Now that our viewers have a solid foundation of who TRT is and why we offered this webinar, let's turn our attention to today's topic. Hospitality organizations have been forced to quickly respond to rapidly evolving guidance related to the COVID-19 pandemic to ensure the safety of both associates and guests. Today's presenter will speak on using safety management systems to address COVID-19 in the workplace. Dr. Mark Friend is a professor and coordinator of the Master of Science in Occupational Safety Management program in the School of Graduate Studies at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. He is a former director of the Board Certified Safety Professionals and a professional member of the American Society of Safety Professionals. He has worked as a safety consultant, trainer, expert witness, and author, and has won numerous awards for his work. It is my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Mark Friend.
Thank you, Dr. Horan. It's my pleasure to be here today, and I'm looking forward to this presentation with you. Today we'll be talking, as was pointed out, about safety management systems, otherwise known as SMS, and COVID-19. We'll be looking at the relationship. Now, one thing I want to point out as we start out, safety management systems really provides you with an approach to overall safety within the workplace, an approach to overall safety management within the workplace. I want to give you a little background, and then we'll become more specific as we go along. SMS, Safety Management Systems, is a comprehensive and collaborative approach. It really brings the whole organization together to get safety done. It is both a methodology and a philosophy. It's a way of doing safety, and it's a way of thinking about safety. Now, SMS has four major components. First one is safety policy, which really demonstrates senior management's commitment to continually improving safety. The second one is safety risk management, and that determines the need for and the adequacy of these risk controls. The third one is safety assurance, which evaluates the effectiveness of what we're doing, these risk control strategies. And then last of all is safety promotion, okay, which is another critical one in this overall process. So moving ahead here, I want to talk to you briefly about a conversation I had with Al Haynes years ago. Al was captain of United Airlines flight from Denver to Chicago to Philadelphia. He was flying a DC-10 with 296 passengers and crew on board. Now at 37,000 feet, the rear engine exploded and shrapnel broke the hydraulic lines. As a result of that, there was no control over the flaps or the rudders. The left engine thrust was reduced. He was diverted to Sioux City, Iowa for emergency landing, but all steering was done along the way with the right and the left engines only. When he landed, a number of people died. He felt very guilty about that, but 184 people survived that crash landing. And he was considered a great hero because it was fully expected that no one would survive. Now, this was really done prior to the implementation of SMS, but I want to talk to you about what he told me. First of all, he said, we had a policy in place. I brought the crew together and one other crew member that was flying in the passenger compartment, and we followed our standard operating procedures until we got to the end. We started at the beginning and worked our way through them until we ran out of those. Secondly, he said, our preparation had paid off. Among us, we had 103 years of flying experience in the cockpit. If we had not let everybody provide their input, it's a cinch we wouldn't have made it. Thirdly, they had safety assurance in place as well. In a simulation exercise about a week before, the airport and the airport personnel had recently practiced responding to the crash of a DC-10. Now, ironically, there was a lot of complaints about that because they said DC-10s don't come and go from this airport. But in this case, about a week later, one landed. They had practiced, and what they had practiced worked. Last of all, promotion had been in place. The standard operating procedures that had been put out there had been published. The flight crew was aware of them from their perspective. The support personnel, the on-the-ground personnel were aware of them from their perspective. So they had all four components in place, even though this SMS really had not been heard of, so to speak, back in those days, not at this level anyway. So how does this relate to COVID-19? Well, we're going to talk about each component of SMS, and we're going to look at the relationships among them, and we'll be talking about how each one can be considered to address the overall problem. Now, first of all, let's talk about establishing the safety policy. You want to think about how you can get everyone involved in this process. For example, putting together a safety committee to take a look at the problem. This could include stakeholders from various perspectives. You can have employees, you can have representatives from throughout the organization, maybe representatives from your customers or clients, representatives from vendors, people that you believe may be able to have a significant input and a significant impact on the output that you're coming up with. Once you've put these people together, what you're asking them to do is to help you develop appropriate policies and to monitor the effectiveness of these policies, how well they're working. But as you're putting the policy together, you want to encourage as many members of the organization to participate as possible. And in this participation, you have to be very careful because you don't want people at the top intimidating or dominating people at the lower levels of the organization. You want people involved at all levels to aid in their commitment toward this overall process. They're helping to provide input, and hopefully they're going to become more and more committed as they participate. Now, when you establish a safety policy, it really begins with a statement such as this: our organization is committed to maintaining and promoting a safe, healthy, and injury-free environment for all of our employees. Now, this is the beginning, but this is going to be part of the overall emergency preparedness, part of the response plan, part of the policy that we relate to COVID-19. When you put this policy together, it's signed off by the top person in the organization, and it's fully integrated into the overall organizational mission. It's periodically reviewed, periodically revised. Now, if you're trying to implement or trying to develop COVID-19 as part of your overall planning process, I really encourage you to go to this website. This can be very, very useful for you because it gives you OSHA guidance as far as developing this type of policy as part of your overall plan. Now, the policy statement will address how management is going to be actively involved in mitigating the hazards, and that, of course, includes the spreading of coronavirus. The team is committed to providing a healthy and safe workplace for all employees, all clients, all visitors. Now, when I say that, you're always looking at risk versus return. You never completely eliminate risk. You never completely eliminate risk. Now, what do I mean by risk? Risk is defined as probability of something going wrong and the cost of something going wrong, which we refer to as severity. In other words, what is the probability times severity? That's what we're looking at here. Probability times severity. Excuse me just a second. And as we go through this overall process, we want to look at risk. We have to consider the return on investment as we consider that risk. The scope of this policy is that it will apply to all employees, all clients, all people that are physically present in our facilities. And the workplace will make available necessary resources. That's the people, the personnel, the protective equipment, okay? Whatever we need, the facilities to comply with these safety and health rules to ensure the safety and health of our employees, our clients, and our visitors. Now, when I say to ensure, again, to the level that we possibly can, and we're looking at risk versus return. And that's critical in all aspects. For example, in my own life, I go in and I teach my classes live twice a week, okay? There's some risk involved in that, but there's a big return as well. So we consider the risk versus the return as we're going through this process. Now, the policy statement will also list any reporting procedures. People will know what they have to do if they see a problem, where they have to go, how do they report it? And we'll talk about that in a minute. It will also indicate unacceptable behaviors, what we do not accept as a behavior that's appropriate in the workplace. And it will also address non-punitive reporting so that people feel free to say something if they see some fault in the system. If they see something, they say something, even if they're involved. Because sometimes we make mistakes. Given the framework that we're given, we make mistakes. And this allows us to report even when we make a mistake so that management can be aware of those mistakes and so that hopefully management can make appropriate corrections as necessary, okay? So the policy statement will refer to the overall plan, and that plan considers and addresses the risks associated with whatever work sites we have, as well as the job tasks. So if we have a place here, a place there, if we have people working here, people working there, we'll address the risk in each of those. And the considerations will include things like this. Where and how and to what sources our workers might be exposed to the virus. And we have to consider things like our customers, our clients. Are they going to be exposed? And if so, how? Other factors that might affect risk will be things like, are we taking in international travelers who may be visiting our locations, and possibly they have a widespread or COVID-19 where they're coming from. Employees who may have been exposed to people in their homes, out in the community, things like that. Any other non-occupational risk factors at home in the community. But we're also considering individual employees and what their risk factors might be. We may have somebody that's working for us who's older aged, or maybe with a medical condition, or maybe a pregnant employee, things like that. These are people that we want to consider, and we have to maybe give them special attention. And we have to consider any special controls that are necessary to reduce the risks that they may be facing there. Very important. So our plan will include the policies, the procedures for prompt identification and isolation of any sick people that we may have in the workplace. So we want to inform and encourage our employees to self-monitor for signs and symptoms of COVID-19. They need to know what those signs are, and they need to be encouraged to report them. We also have to develop policies and procedures for employees reporting, as I say, when they're sick. How do they go about that? What if they're experiencing these symptoms? And they also have to be told that they need to isolate when they have these. We want to also ensure that if we have temporary employees or employees coming in from other organizations working on the inside of our organization, that they are following the policies that we've set forward. So if we have contract employees, for example, they follow those policies as well. And one of the things that often comes up, workers say, well, what about my paycheck or vacation time, things like that. These issues that are going to come up during sickness, as we're putting this policy together and as we're addressing it, we want to address these issues as well so that people know exactly what they're dealing with. Now, the plan will also address basic infection prevention measures, hand washing, wearing personal protective equipment, encouraging respiratory etiquette. What if you cough or what if you sneeze? How do you do that? If I've got people coming from the outside, customers, public, am I making tissues available for them? Trash receptacles. Is it easy for them to wash their hands, okay, or put some type of hand sanitizer on them? Things like that. We want to maintain physical distance among our employees and between our employees and others as much as we possibly can. We also want to discourage workers using other people's equipment, their phones, their desks, their offices, things like that, whenever possible. We're trying to maintain our housekeeping practices. We're trying to keep our workplace clean. So we have regular disinfecting of services, equipment, other elements in the work environment. This is critical. We have to follow these procedures. We put the procedures in place and we fully expect them to be followed as we move forward. Now, as a part of this, accountability and responsibility are critical. This is defined throughout the organization. Senior management, all employees have accountability for their responsibilities. They know what their responsibilities are, and they're accountable for maintaining those responsibilities. These are communicated throughout the organization. They are built into the system. And we will talk about this a little more as we move forward. So we would like to have one person at the top of the organization that's ultimately accountable for safety, ultimately accountable for COVID-19. This could be the top person. This could be the owner, the CEO, someone like that. But this is the individual that will ultimately control and allocate the resources. This is the individual that will ensure that the program is in place, that the plan is being implemented. This is the person that will regularly review performance. So this is the person we ultimately report to. We tell them what's going on, how things are working, and so forth. Now, this top person will ensure that the policy addresses the following. Number one, prompt communication of critical information. Now, as information is learned, it makes its way to the top of the organization. So an employee comes to me and tells me about a problem they've seen. Not everybody's wearing the appropriate personal protective equipment. They're not maintaining the appropriate social distance. The interaction with clients or customers or visitors is too close. We need to be able to report. Once we report, we have a closed loop process in place. So if somebody tells me what's going on, I want to get back to them as quickly as I can. Here's what we're doing about this. Here's what we're not doing about this. Here's what we will be doing about this. But I want to communicate back, because that communication, that closed loop, keeps the communication flowing. Secondly, we have to make sure that this critical communication makes its way upward. We cannot filter it out as it goes from level A to level B to level C as it makes its way to the top of the organization. This is not a pyramid. Critical information has to make its way to the top. Also, individuals, employees, have to have easy accessibility to report, and they have to also be able to report anonymously. For example, where I work, we have these boxes throughout the building where if people have a concern, they can write that concern down, they can drop it in the box. The box is periodically opened, reviewed, and if people have complaints that they don't want anyone to know where it's coming from, they can put it in that box as an example. But all contractors, all temporary employees, all people that work for us, whether they're full-time, whether they're part-time, whether they're coming in from the outside, are obligated to abide by our procedures. But we maintain a continuous effort to keep these routine operations that work well in place and to minimize the variations as much as we possibly can. One thing we've learned about safety and health procedures is that the routine variations that are in place because they work well, are the ones that we want to try to abide by as much as possible. And we want to do everything we can to reduce the variations from those strong working routines that we have in place. So our policy permits zero tolerance for unacceptable behavior. So the policy will indicate what acceptable behavior is and what unacceptable behavior is. And if somebody tells me what's going on, that's not necessarily a get out of jail free card. We want them to tell me. But on the other hand, if somebody intentionally violates a rule or procedure and they say, well, I'll just tell them about it and I'll be okay. No, that's not the way it is. We want them to inform us, but we don't want them to think that they can engage in unacceptable behaviors and get away with it. So discipline is clearly defined. And there are two rules that generally we follow. Number one, discipline is progressive. Okay, the first time you get an oral warning. The second time, a written warning. The third time, you're going to get a week off without pay. The fourth time, you're out of here. That's number one. It's progressive. Number two, we follow the red hot stove rule, which you may be aware of. But our discipline is like a red hot stove. We see the stove is red hot. It gives us warning. We know that if we touch the stove, there's consequence to it. We will get burned. We know that every single time we touch the stove, we will get burned. It's consistent. And it's also impersonal. It doesn't matter who touched the stove. It treats everybody the same. So our discipline is progressive and it follows the red hot stove rule. Now, the next component that I want to talk about is promotion. We have to get the word out. So the leader of the organization formally notifies the organization, this is what's going on. This can be done through a virtual discussion. It can be done through a virtual speech, a virtual thing. It can be done through departmental talks, depending on the size of the organization, through meetings, through formal training and retraining, emails, conversations up and down the organization. But we have to make sure that everybody in the organization understands, knows what their responsibilities are, know that they are accountable for carrying out these responsibilities. That is critical. Now, as we're working on safety risk management, we're trying to manage the risk. This is our other component here, another component. We look at the hierarchy of controls. Now, I've engaged with OSHA before because companies that I've worked with maybe didn't follow this hierarchy of controls. OSHA expects you to start at the top and work your way down through. Now, if you've got a way that you can eliminate COVID-19 where you work, fantastic. That would be the ideal thing. We physically remove the hazard. When we can't remove the hazard, we try to substitute something else for it, okay? It would be great if we could substitute a healthy workplace for COVID-19, Probably not going to be able to do that. So we work our way through the last three controls, and that's what I want to talk about here. Engineering controls. What are some examples of things that we can do with engineering controls? And this is where OSHA expects you to begin. Well, we could put high efficiency air filters in, for example. We can increase our ventilation rates in the work environment, having people eat outside, things like that. We can put physical barriers in, okay, such as these clear plastic sneeze guard, or just isolate one place from another in the workplace. But that's what we want to do if we possibly can. I know where I work, where people work together, office to office, they've built barriers between those offices so that people won't be exposing one another. Once we've done all that we can there, then we want to move toward administrative controls. What can we do from a managerial perspective? We can establish this social distancing criteria. We can attempt to reduce the number of employees or the number of customers or clients at a given time. Non-essential travel, nope, we're not doing it. We want to develop communication plans so that when workers have concerns, they can express those concerns so that we can get back to them. And we want to be sure that we have education and training on these risk factors and these protective behaviors. Now, the last one is PPE and personal protective equipment. And I've mentioned a few things here. PPE is critical, but two things I want to say to you. Number one is that if PPE is required, it's management's responsibility to provide it. And number two, if PPE is required, it's management's responsibility to train the employees on the use of that PPE. So they have to provide it and they have to train. That's management's responsibility. Now, as we're going through this process, there's a term which you may or may not be aware of, and that term is a LARP, as low as reasonably practicable. In other words, we look at these concerns, we look at these approaches, and we have to ask ourselves, is this something that we can practicably approach? Is this something that we can do? Because we're always looking at that return on investment. We're always looking at the cost. I mean, we could completely eliminate this risk. We could close the business down, but we don't want to do that. So we're all exposed to risk on a day-to-day basis, but we want to minimize that risk as much as we practically can. That's the goal that we're after. That's what we're trying to accomplish here, okay? Now, moving forward, safety assurance. We've put these procedures, we've put these practices in place. Now we want to see if they're working. Now, one of the things that I often observe is that the practices are in place and we just assume everything's working well. That's not the case. We're going back to see if what we put in place is in fact working. We're looking at both individual performance and we're looking at organizational performance. We're looking to see, are things working as they should be working? And if we see deviations, if we see problems, these serve as proactive sources of data that we need to make adjustments. I'm not going to go out and investigate an accident after the fact and change that. I don't want that to happen. I don't want the accident to occur. I don't want the person to be exposed to COVID-19. I want to prevent it. So I'm looking to see if these preventative measures are working, okay? I'm not looking for a reactive source. I'm looking for a proactive source. That's what I'm trying to do. Now, as I'm considering making changes in the workplace, I always have to ask myself, is there any possibility that these changes might introduce new risks or operations? These changes could be internal, they could be external. I'm changing personnel, I'm changing the management structure, I'm changing the layout of the facility, whatever. But before I do that, I try to analyze those changes for risk. Now, if the changes come from the outside, there are new regulations in place. There are new things that I can or cannot do. Maybe there's some new technology that I'm going to have to introduce, something along those lines. Whatever it is, I need to be aware of those changes beforehand. I don't want to analyze the changes for potential introduction of additional risk. And I want to address that risk before the changes ever take place. Once the change takes place, then I will periodically go back and review it to make sure that the change had no adverse impacts on us, okay? So in monitoring the regular operations, I will be, number one, conducting regular work observations. I'm checking it out. I'm looking at things. I'm seeing if what we have in place is working. I'm asking safety questions. I'm talking to employees. I'm talking to clients. I'm talking to visitors. I'm reviewing, I'm inspecting, I'm investigating. Also, I'm engaging myself in professional organizations. I know myself, I'm active in the American Society of Safe Professionals. I've been active in the National Safety Council. things like that. It makes a difference. Talking to people that are doing jobs similar to what I do, that have organizations similar to what I have, can be very, very helpful as we move through this process. So when I'm looking at this overall process, number one, I will have safety objectives in place. These are things I want to accomplish. These are criteria that I want to put in place as far as safety performance is concerned. Then I'll have targets. This is what I'm looking for relative to that safe performance. And I will have indicators. How will I know whether or not I'm reaching those objectives? Now, let me give you an example here as we move ahead. An example would be, I'm going to improve workplace safety and health through the proper use and care of personal protective equipment. Okay, whatever that is, maybe gloves, face mask, whatever. Secondly, I've got a performance target in place. I want to obviously see a decrease in the number of exposures because people are wearing their PPE, but I'm looking for 80% compliance right off the bat, 90% compliance within week 2, and 100% compliance from there on. So those are my targets. Now I'm looking for indicators. How do I know? Okay, I'll go out and I'll do inspections. I'm going to tell you ahead of time I'm coming out, and I'm going to look. And I expect sometimes we have that Hawthorne effect in place where sometimes people are changing their behavior because they know they're being inspected. But I will also do unannounced inspections. I'm going to walk through and see if people are obeying what they're supposed to be doing. And then last of all, if I have any reports, I'm going to see if people are deviating on those reports. So I have objectives, I have targets, I have indicators, and I'm putting those in place for the things that I want to accomplish. And I'm periodically checking them. And if things aren't working, then I'm going to go back and make adjustments to try to make them work in the future. Okay. With an effective safety risk management process, safety assurance activities will give us the outcomes that are really associated with an effective safety and health performance. And I'll see that as I do the monitoring and the measurement. But I'm going to engage in this ongoing assessment throughout. As long as we're engaging in these practices, I'm going to assess. As long as I'm requiring PPE, I'm going to go back and see if it's working. I'm never going to stop. Now, if I go out every week and I see, hey, I'm not seeing any changes, or every month, I may reduce the number of times that I check, but I will continue to check throughout the life cycle of this process. It's never going to stop. Now, realize that safety risk management and the safety assurance process are not dependent on one another, but if we're going to have a good safety management system in place, they have to be integrated and act in concert with one another. So if I see a problem with the safety assurance process, I'll feed it back into the safety risk management process. We'll take a look at it again and see how we can correct that problem. Once we've corrected it, we've looked at the potential consequences, then we'll stick it back into the system and we'll start over again through safety assurance. But if we see a deviation, if we see a problem, it goes back into safety risk management and we'll do the things that we did up front. Now, there are 5 safety management system questions that are critical to us. 5 safety management system questions that are critical. Number 1, what are our most serious safety and health concerns? What are they? Number 2, how do we know these are the most serious concerns? Okay. Now here again, it's based on risk. Where are we likely to have the most severe problems, and what's the likelihood that these problems will arise? Okay. And we'll prioritize those. These are the highest risk, the next highest risk, and so on. And we will work our way down through the system. Now, we've prioritized the risk. Now, the next question is, what are we doing about that risk? What are we doing about that risk? And is what we are doing working? And that's where that safety assurance process comes back in. And a critical question is, how do we know what we're doing is working? So we have to have procedures in place to check, to see if what we put in place is really, in fact, working. Now, think about this where you are. Think about the risk with COVID-19 that we face. How are you addressing the risk? And are you checking to see if what you're doing is working as you address it? Are you periodically going back and going through it? And if you're seeing any deviations, are you attempting to make corrections to those deviations? And as you do, are you going back and looking to see if these corrections have any potential faults themselves? Okay. You have to know what you're doing is working, and you have to know that you have a method of checking to be sure that what you're doing is working. Now, I want to talk about OSHA here briefly. In fiscal year 2020, OSHA received 10,000 coronavirus-related complaints, and they investigated every single one of them. They conducted over 20,000 inspections in response to worker complaints, injuries, fatalities, and referrals impacted by coronavirus only. 20,000 plus inspections. Now, as of the end of December, OSHA reported pandemic-related citations for more than 260 employers as a result of over 300 inspections. Now, the fines totaled almost $4 million, and I'm sure they're over $4 million by now. But that's exactly what happened as we went through that process. Now, a typical problem is reporting. And, you know, typically in a lot of the industries where some of us work, in the restaurant industry, for example, we're not necessarily required, unless OSHA requests us to keep the typical OSHA 300, OSHA 300A forms, and so on. But if there is a workplace incident which results in one of these factors, you are required to report it. If you have a fatality, you have to report that fatality within 8 hours. If you have an inpatient hospitalization of one of your employees as a result of a workplace exposure, you have to report that within 24 hours. Amputation, loss of an eye, obviously those would not be related to COVID-19, likely, but you have to report it. And here's the phone number that you use to report: 1-800-321-OSHA, okay, 6742. 1-800-321-6742. Now, what if I don't report? What happens then? If OSHA finds out that you had an incident like one of these and you didn't report it, it can be extremely expensive. Companies have been known to be cited for over $35,000 for one failure to report an incident. So this can be an extremely expensive process. So you want to be sure that you do that, okay? Now, what does OSHA say about COVID-19? Generally, we don't have legal requirements specifically addressing COVID-19. However, OSHA requires employers to assess the hazards to which their workers may be exposed. They have to evaluate what the risk of that exposure is. That's what we've talked about. And they have to make worker controls. They have to put these worker controls in place to prevent these exposures as much as possible. Now, these exposures can include, like we've talked about, these engineering methods, administrative controls, safe work practices, personal protective equipment. Now, as we go down this road, we've got to be aware of the fact that we may have understands in place. For example, if they're wearing respiratory equipment, we've got standards that specifically address that. You know, if I give my workers a pair of safety glasses that they have to put on, I'm supposed to instruct them on how to wear those safety glasses. Anytime I provide PPE, the requirement is that I provide the appropriate instruction as well. Now, OSHA may contact you. If you have an employee that complains, okay, either by phone, by letter, OSHA may contact you, okay, and they will tell you of the alleged hazard, okay, and they may tell you of any additional modification procedures that they expect. But if there is a fatality or an imminent danger in their mind, then you will be prioritized for an inspection, and they can and will come out to do inspections. One of my former students that was a safety professional for a company was telling me, now this was a pharmaceutical manufacturer, but he told me that one day OSHA showed up in a motorhome, and they parked that motorhome in the parking lot, and they were there for 2 weeks. They spent 2 weeks of that living and working out of that motorhome as they performed this inspection. I mean, it was very thorough. So you need to watch. You need to watch yourself. You say, well, they're probably not going to come out to here. If it's a COVID-19 violation, there's a good chance they will. Now, like I say, violations of any of these things could be considered serious. And I said, this is a mistake here. I said up to 13,000. This can be tens of thousands of dollars for these violations here. I don't know where I got, that's an older number. That can be very expensive though, these violations, very expensive. Now, you also need to be aware of the general duty clause. The general duty clause requires employers to provide a safe and healthful working environment, okay? So you want to keep the workplace free of hazards to which employees may be exposed. If the hazard's recognized, if it's likely to cause death or serious harm, and if there's a feasible and useful way to correct the hazard, you want to do it. But if they don't have a specific clause in place, they may get back to this, and if they can prove all four of those elements, then they can cite you for that as well. this can also be a very expensive process. So if you want to address the COVID-19 problem using SMS, number one, I really encourage you to establish a written policy, get management on board, come to agreement on the approach with management. Number two, establish your safety risk management approach. Identify how you're going to address the problem, encourage participation throughout the organization. Number three, put safety assurance in place. You want to monitor all methods throughout their life cycle. Make sure that everything you're having them do is working. And fourthly, promote, promote, promote. You want to stay on top of this by keeping the word current, by making sure that employees are aware of what's going on. Now, to successfully implement an SMS, you, number one, establish the expectations for everybody in the organization. You engage personnel throughout the organization. Okay, you want to get them involved and committed to identifying these risks. You develop a customized safety management system implementation plan, which is relevant and appropriate for your particular organization. And you carefully review any actions, identify any potential new hazards or variation needing attention before implementation. Now, let me say one more thing here. This is so critical. If where you work, you have a safety professional in place, or if you have someone whose primary responsibility is looking at safety, their role is to monitor what's going on in the workplace and to advise management. It's always management's role to implement these procedures to make sure they're happening. I can go out into the workplace and I can provide advice, but whether or not that advice is accepted depends upon management's implementation and encouragement to accept that advice. Management makes the rules, management follows the rules, management abides by the rules. They've got to make it happen. My responsibility is to monitor and advise. Their responsibility is to get it done. And that's what management is trying to do here. That is critical, okay? And of course, as you're going through this process, you must consider the risk versus the return on this overall process, because we can't fix every problem. We can't. There will always be risk. But what we have to do is we have to ask ourselves, is the effort that we're putting into this, is it appropriate? Is it relatively feasible in terms of the expense, in terms of the effort, and so on? It's got to be practical. It's got to be appropriate. We can't go overboard. If we were going to go overboard, we'd go out of business in no time. It's that risk versus return process that's in place. We're looking for a positive return on investment. Okay, so at this point, do you have any comments or any questions that you would like to direct toward me? And I am certainly open to those comments or questions. Okay, I will stop sharing the screen at this point. Okay, I hope. Let's see, and I will turn it back over to you, Susan.
Thank you, Dr. Friend. I actually have a question.
Yes.
With COVID fatigue, how can an employer ensure that his employees or her employees are maintaining these protocols that are set in place?
In terms of what again?
COVID fatigue. People are tired of dealing with this. So
yes.
How can an employer work
okay.
to make sure this happens?
It's critical that you set the fences up. Do you know what I'm saying? These are the rules, these are the regulations. And I may be tired of it, I may not want to do it, but I still always have to abide. And management will keep its eyes open. Management will make sure I abide. We're all tired of this. I've got cabin fever myself. I haven't eaten out at a restaurant in a year, okay? I mean, since last March, almost a year. And these are the kind of things we have to consider. And our employees, as we're talking to the employees, these are the guidelines that they must follow. And we'll pat them on the back when they do. We give them words of encouragement. I say pat them on the back. You know, that's the way we used to pat them on the back from 6 feet away. We give them those words of encouragement. But on the other hand, if they don't follow the rules, then we have procedures in place for that as well. We have to do that. These are the fences. You've got to live inside the fence. If you cross over the fence, there are consequences. And we want to give you those intangible rewards if you do abide by the rules. Thank you for that. You know, you're doing a good job. We appreciate that. And those intangible rewards can make a tremendous difference. I think we have time here. Let me deviate very briefly. I had one of my students one time tell me that he worked in a coal mine as a foreman. And one morning, one of his coworkers, one of the other foremen came up and he said, I bet you we can produce more coal today than you can produce. And he said, oh, yeah, what do you bet? And he said, they were both in JCC. He said, I bet you a case of jelly that we're selling. And it was this guy versus that guy. He said, we won. And I gave all my guys some of that jelly at the end of the day, the next day. And he said, a year later, one of my guys came up to me and he said, you know that jar of jelly you gave us a year ago? He said, yes, I've got that on my mantle. And every time I look at it, I smile, because he was recognized for a job well done. And as our employees do those jobs well, we need to recognize them. We don't have to give them time off. We don't have to give them vacation, but we recognize them and they know that we appreciate that they're doing a job well. That makes all the difference, I think.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question from Charles Carpenter. Charles wants to know, in your experience, Dr. Friend, what are common things that workplaces overlook?
Common things that workplaces overlook. You know, it seems to me, and I have visited many, many workplaces over the years, but one of the common things, first of all, I've noticed that housekeeping is a typical indicator of how well safety is being done. Good housekeeping often indicates a positive safety culture. People keeping the workplace in good shape, people following the rules in terms of housekeeping. Secondly, I've noticed that sometimes management will deviate. That's common. They'll put these rules in place and they don't follow the rules themselves. I've been in workplaces, for example, where you're supposed to wear hearing protection when you go into these noisy environments. And I'll go into that noisy environment and I'll see managers in that noisy environment without the hearing protection. One of my former students was working at a chemical facility in Tennessee, and I went to visit him. And before we walked out of the office area there where we started, I had to watch a video on what to do to protect myself. And when I walked out on the grounds, I noticed that every single person on those grounds was following the appropriate safety procedures as they were taught to follow. And I thought, you know, these guys are really doing it well. They're doing it right, because that's relatively uncommon, at least as far as what I've seen. We make sure that when we put these rules in place, when we put these policies in place, when we put these procedures in place, that everybody from the top to the bottom follows them. And I see these deviations occur. And if it occurs at the top of the organization, or if it occurs at the bottom and nobody's enforcing it, it's just going to spread. That's just the way it is. We can't have supervisor inattention. We can't have top management inattention. We've got to keep it in line altogether. I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
We have another question from Jana. She wants to know, what recommendations do you have for fostering positive safety culture?
A positive safety culture? I believe that one of the key things that you can do is get employees involved. Safety committees, safety teams, task force teams, accident investigation teams, whatever it is, think of ways that you can involve employees and get their input. Now, when you're involving employees and you're trying to get their input, another key feature of that is to listen to their input. You want to make sure that what you're hearing is working. You want to make sure that what you're hearing is being tried out, that it's being tested. And like I say, that closed loop process is so critical. We want to have that closed loop in place. We want to be sure that anytime I get input, I provide appropriate output. And that makes such a difference. You want to keep that culture going and keep that communication loop flowing. So that's so important, so important.
We have another question from an anonymous attendee who wants to know, this COVID is a temporary situation. It's what everybody's thinking. So how do you influence people's decisions to adopt new safety procedures and protocols for this situation that they think will pass soon?
Well, you know, this is just one example of something that's temporary. One example. You know, you take a look, for example, at violence in the workplace, or we have a random shooter. We have things happen all of the time in the workplace, things that come and go. but we have to have a plan in place to respond to these things. And we have to have a plan in place that's going to work. And when we have that plan in place, we have to make sure that we follow that plan. Yeah, COVID-19 may be temporary, but we may have a hurricane next summer, or we may have a tornado sometime. We have emergencies that come up. And when these emergencies arrive, we have procedures in place that we follow. COVID-19 is one thing. Sure, it may be temporary, but when it's gone, we'll have something else. We need to have these procedures in place, and we need to follow the procedures that we have in place, regardless of the fact whether it's just here today and going tomorrow, or whether it's here today and not going for 5 to 10 more years. We've got to do that. That's a critical part of what we do. And management's got to ensure that that happens through this positive reinforcement when necessary, through negative reinforcement when necessary.
Thank you, Dr. Friend. I think that's all the questions we have. Dr. Haran, do you have anything else that you'd like to add at this time?
Absolutely. So I'm going to request that Dr. Friend bring the PowerPoint screen back up temporarily. So sorry, Dr. Friend.
That's fine.
So just in case you are interested in learning a little bit more about today's speaker or any of the collaborative sponsors of today's webinar, we have a few resources for you.
By the way, our references.
Very
now I'll
helpful.
move to the research. Yeah.
Perfect. So this is our 4 more information slides. So we have a link to Dr. Friend's faculty page if you're interested in contacting him or learning more about his research. We have a link to our targeted research training page if you're interested in learning more about research, graduate training, or outreach as part of our program. And we have a link to Rosen College of Hospitality Management's website. This presentation will be hosted both on their website and on their YouTube channel after. Next slide, please. And I will give you one more reminder, this time for all webinar attendees, whether you're a hospitality professional, a student, or a researcher, please take a moment to take the post-webinar survey. You can access it through this QR code or this link, and I will be emailing registered viewers a link through email after this presentation. We want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to hear about this important topic, and we wish you all the luck in implementing it into your workplace.
Thank you, Dr. Haran. Thank you, Dr. Friend. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And we hope to see you at our next Research, Recovery, and Reskill webinar.
Thank you. And thank you for this opportunity. I very much appreciate it.